What's up, guys? Welcome to the Bolden Movement podcast. Today I have a very special guest, Miss Chianti Blackmon, the founder and principal consultant of the Grace and Growth, Equity, Justice, and Transformation.
Yes.
This is a very, very, very special conversation because now we can go into depth about the realer things in this episode. So I'm very excited for this one to start. You guys will hear a lot more of my story now that we're getting into the season. I'm very comfortable with a good friend of mine sharing my story in a way where it can be received properly. And maybe we sift through some heavy things today. Maybe we don't, but we'll see where it goes. All right. Never any pressure on my show. So getting into today, what I really want to get into is how I was brought up and how I feel that led me to where I am today, and certain obstacles I had to go through because of my upbringing. And the only reason I'm going this route, this avenue, and I'm not counting reps and talking about gym stuff right now is because a lot of men, no matter the ethnicity, are struggling with mental health. And then this also makes a trickling effect of the suicide rate going up. You know, a lot of things happen when we don't address stress, but we have to go usually pretty far back to figure out the source of that stress. You see, like growing up and the way society is, the easiest emotion we can have is anger as a man. It's easy to be mad and, aggressive and cut people off and flick people off and cuss people out and be that. But that's not always the emotion you actually feel. It's just the one you feel like you can outwardly show. So now, because the inner child in you may be hurt, or because you may have anxiety, or because you may feel lost in life, you're mad at the world more than anything. And now you don't know how to express it because it's not openly talked about how to express yourself as a man. If you express yourself, they'll tell you you have too much feminine energy. If you express yourself too much, right? So you have to have that balance. But not everybody is this way. See, I'm finding that not everybody feels that they can't express themselves as a man. And a lot of it comes to how they were brought up. And then I have to think about what they tell us in school about nature versus nurture. Didn't really know what it meant until later on because I was not paying attention in school. I'm not even going to lie. But as an adult, what it means to me is when I talk to people who come up in a house and they're super traumatized from things that happened in that house, they're in more of that survival mode because that's what they had to be in, that mode to get through their house on a daily basis. But that trickles to being an adult. So now when you're an adult and you lived in survival mode, you're on defense more. So maybe you sabotage things that don't need to be sabotaged. Maybe their relationships, maybe their jobs, maybe it's, you just having all this built up anxiety because you're used to chaos. When you're used to chaos, you can create chaos and you feel comfortable in it and you stay in it because the little kid in you grew up in chaos and it grew up in trauma. But how that really affected me as an adult was when somebody comes to me with really a helping hand, I'm more skeptical. I'm more like, nah, too good to be true. Like, nah, I'm good on my own. So I'm used to surviving on my own. But when I talk to somebody on the opposite side of it, where it was a loving family, you eat at the table, you talk, you express. Like, there's no secrets here. It's like you look at the world much more openly. You may be more naive to the world, but you may be so naive to the fact where the world slaps you in the face so hard, you feel mad that your parents and your family sheltered you so much that when you felt the actual world, it crushed you. So it's like you got to think of the balance of that nature and that nurture, because I've seen both sides of it. I've seen you being coddled, get everything that you want. The world slaps you. Now you don't know what to do. And I've seen survival where you sabotage everything good that comes to you. So, a good example of this for me, a few years back, I was invited to a birthday party, and this was a group in a room I wanted to be in. Let's just say that I wanted to be in this room. This was a time to elevate. This was a time to grow. But my mentality wasn't there. So even though that opportunity was there was things there that were going to trigger me that I did not know then were my triggers yet. So now walking into that room, there were so many triggers in there. I didn't really have a chance because I wasn't aware. But if I was in that same situation today, I'd be able to handle it a lot differently. And it's not because I've changed my childhood, because I've become more aware and self-reflect often. So I'm in this room, I'm at this birthday party, and it's open bar. And trauma and liquor don't mix. We know this. And I'm drinking, and I hit that sweet spot. And I'm talking to these business owners, and I'm getting this insight, and then I don't stop. And then I keep going, and I keep going. And next thing I'm walking up the street and through the town, and then, the police are over here and there's people yelling over there. And apparently I'm kicked out the party, but I don't know why I got kicked out. Next thing you know, I'm on the street, I'm yelling at everybody, yeah, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And, whole city of Frederick cops are out here, like, go home. And I'm just like, nah, like nobody tells me what to do. Like, I'm not going home because the way I grew up, there was nothing scarier than my father. So it doesn't matter if you bring 100 cops out here. It's not going to phase me. There's nothing that was more terrifying than my father growing up. So if you're a coach, you're a teacher, you're a cop, I didn't care. I didn't care. I had to be heard. Back then, looking back, the triggers of the drinks, I should have known better. But it's also that little kid of being the youngest kid, of not being heard. So if I was felt invisible from when I was born until I was 5 or 6 years old, I felt like adults couldn't even see me in my own house until then. So see, now when I get older, when that inner child taps in, hey, hey, I'm here, hey, 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 make sure everybody sees me, on top of the liquor, on top of the music's playing my dad used to play, on top of, whatever trigger. And it's just like it swarms. And then you have to, how are you going to pull yourself out of it?
Mhm.
But I had to suffer a lot of consequences and lose quite literally everything I had to get to a point to see these things, to see that I had triggers, but it wasn't to blame my parents or my upbringing. It's for me to realize how to maneuver as an adult, because it's not my parents' job to give me answers on based on what I think I should hear, based on what I think they should say. Like, it goes back to the expectation. You have to be careful of the expectations that you have when you go into certain conversations, especially heavy ones, because you want answers, you want relief from it. Like, you want to understand it so bad, but you also have to deliver it in a way that they can accept it, which means a lot of time you got to bring everything way down, even though inside you're like, oh my, when I see this person. But to deliver that properly, you have to bring it way down. See, that's a big lesson I learned. Like, the screaming back and forth, like, I don't argue with anybody anymore. If that's how you feel, I'm going to say, all right, but this is how I feel about it. And if you start talking over me, arguing, I'm just like, all right, we can talk about something else. But nobody wins in those. And I've learned that. And that's across the board in anything, in a relationship, in a friendship, and in anything that you do. So you get to a point where it's like you have to control your emotions evenly as a man, I feel like. But you also have to be able to have that sensitive side. You have to know how to be human still. I think when you shut down too much because all the stuff I'm saying, a lot of people just hold all that in.
Yeah.
When you hold all that in, that's when you cut people off in traffic and you cuss them out because you're not mad, you're depressed, right? That's because there's so much stuff you don't deal with and you feel like you're at a point in your life where you didn't think maybe you would be at that point, but you don't outwardly say anything, so nobody can help you. And then your mind idles when you're by yourself, and that idled mind is what's killing people because you just idle because nobody knows you're going through it. So, I find, to have those confidants that, I can speak to, like really speak to about the real things, because everybody needs at least one. I don't think you need 10 or 12 people to tell your whole life to. I don't think your whole life should be on Facebook or social media or anything like that, because it gets tainted. It gets tainted because there's too many people, with their hands in your relationship and your personal life. And, for me, that's sacred. Like my family, my personal life is sacred. So I don't put that out there, for the public to view and to judge and to talk about. But my principles and things I believe in, I'm going to put those out there all day long. And, everything I'm talking about today, I believe wholeheartedly. Like I said, I've suffered a lot of consequences and to get to this point. So I don't play about doing something that can compromise where I'm at, that can compromise my peace, that can compromise anything like that, because it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. So
Yeah.
with all that being said, why I open up like that is because what an opening, right? Why I open up like that is because I wonder your view on how you grew up, because you did become such a successful person and you kept that drive to keep studying, to keep helping people. You've always helped me. I know you help people every day, and you go through a lot of tough things too. And I wonder what you pull out of some of the tough things you have to unpack. I wonder if it's like, do you not touch certain things because you're afraid what you will unpack, or do you try to unpack everything that you can? Do you try to get as much insight as possible, or is it like bits and pieces? Like, how do you take that?
Okay, so woo, right? There's so much context and you provided and information. So
Right.
um and so I think just to first acknowledge what you were hitting on in terms of like gender dynamics and expectations is what we refer to, as the cycle of socialization. You're socialized to behave certain ways and you're either celebrated or penalized. And that's how you learn norms, right? Um, and so as it relates to how folks, in their gender identity expression, everything you've learned about that has been through socialization, social norms, and what's expected and what's celebrated. And, you hit the nail on the head. I think that the world, our communities, our families play a pivotal role in how we learn how to express ourselves, what emotions are accepted in the way that we express them, which ones maybe shunned or emotions that maybe, I don't want to say punished, but there's a negative consequence to how you've expressed yourself. So I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying and how we look at raising boys and girls, and what that looks like. And we're not even going to get into, right, like gender fluid and the
Right.
spectrum of things.
I know it
But
can
just,
go deep. Right.
yeah, we can, but it's very, very clear, and I think of like the toddler that falls, and how many times we tell little boys dry it up, and little girls that rush and coddle. Those subtle messages are giving us information. And so our families and how we were raised do play a role in how we emotionally express ourselves, how we handle conflict,
Right.
what we see. And so it is multi-layered. My journey, right, I was raised by a single mother. She was a teen mom, so my mother was a senior in high school when she had me. And it's, as an adult now, it's interesting when you think back on certain things. Like, I remember my mom loved Pee-wee's Playhouse. Well, I have a better context for it now. She was like in her early 20s, and that's what
Right.
you kind of like those things. Like, her favorite cereal was Apple Jacks, and
Yeah.
nobody could touch her Apple Jacks, right? So like, I have those sorts of things where it's like, yeah, like my mother was raising me and still growing up, still developing into her own sense of self. And my mother's she was the oldest of 7. And at every developmental stage in my life, one or more of my aunts and uncles have lived with us. And so, I've seen how my uncles interact with my mom and with my aunts and how they interact with her. And I think for me, I've thought a lot about this. It's interesting you ask, like, where the drive came from. And I honestly, I don't know. I think I just always felt I wanted something more. And I grew up, like, I'm like a true 80s baby. I love my brother, and like, he was born in 88. And I'm like,
You really made the cut. I don't know if sure count.
2 years in the 80s, but truly, right, was raised in the 80s, and the 90s. And I think higher education was like a big, especially in the Black community, right? It was, you have to go to school. Like, this was the ticket.
Right.
And for me, it was the first time I got a 3.0. Remember? It was like the 6th grade, right? When I started doing GPAs, and I got a 3.0. And it felt like that set a bar, and the expectations were just there for me. Like, so you can do this. Yeah, you need to excel. And so then, being in special programs and things like that, where there was this cultivation. And I'm from Canton, Ohio, and it's a smaller city, but smaller, and not really a ton of industries there. There was a huge manufacturing industry. Obviously, when with what happened in the 90s and Bill Clinton, and moving things and being able to move things off, out of the states, impacted, right? So there was a time where all of those jobs were just decimated. And so when I graduated from high school, I got into every college I applied to. I remember my the Ohio State University acceptance letter, and they sent me a financial aid package, and I didn't know what I didn't know. Like, I had no one to help me navigate that, but I was driven. I was forced to take a gap year. It wasn't by choice. My mother, again, not knowing what she doesn't know, and she didn't give me specific things in a timely manner, so I had to wait. But in that time, like, I remember applying to for a scholarship at Bolden State University. University of Toledo was my first choice, but again, I didn't know what I didn't know. So I ended up at Kent State, our Start campus, which was there, and the woman helped me. She was like, "This is what you have in grants." And I was like, I don't want to take out loans. And she was like, well, this is how many classes you can take. So I started off with like 3 classes, and I took 3, and slowly but surely. And I do not know how I ended up at the University of Akron. I remember touring Akron and not liking it. I remember being like, oh, because you could drive through the campus, and I didn't like that. But somehow I ended up there with a friend for something. I don't remember how, but I remember sitting with a friend, and we were with them in financial aid, and I'd gotten a job at GE Card Services is what it was called now, Synchrony Bank now, but it was GE Card Services, which was like the thing. Like, that's what you wanted to get into. Like, I was making $9.90 an hour at 18, in 1999.
Bond.
Listen, I remember they sent me this big benefits book. Yeah. And I'll never forget asking my mother, like, what is a beneficiary? And she was like, don't worry about it. Just put my name down. Right. Yeah. And so it could have been easy for me to be like, great, I have this well-paying job. I don't necessarily need to go to college. But when I was at Akron, I just happened to ask, I said, hey, I think by that point, I was living on my own and I had transitioned to full time. And I was like, if I work full time, do I still need like my mom's information? And she was like, how much money did you make? And I remember I made $30,000 and you could not have told me it. I was like, this was like
Yeah.
2001.
Yeah.
She's like 20-year-old. That is a lot of money.
Yes.
And she was like, you have your own health insurance? And I was like, yes. And she was like, you could file independent. And that transformed the trajectory. And no, no dig against my mom. She didn't have what we call the cultural capital. She didn't know how to support me in navigating this. And so I was able to sort of take the reins in my own hands. And after that, as soon as I found that out, I transferred to Akron immediately because I was like, okay, I had a car by then. And that for me, being able to sort of take that and then, being surrounded by, I was surrounded by Delta women. I'm a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And I watched how they moved. And that's when I learned about, you can get a graduate assistantship and that's how you pay for a master's degree. Learning to get involved on campus, those things, right? And so I just have always sought out people where I'm like, something I need to know. Let me figure out either one, like, how can we make this mutually beneficial? Or two, let me clock and do the same thing. And so
do you feel like at this point you're becoming like a perfectionist? Like, was that ever a thing for you?
Oh my goodness, yes. One of my favorite quotes is perfectionism is the highest order of self-abuse.
I figured. So where do you think it became, why did it go from you thinking you could do it to wanting to be perfect every time you were doing academics? Like what made
it's coming from a deficit mindset, right? So for me, it was all I could see, especially in that time of my life, was what I was missing. I didn't have this, so I have to make sure this is tight. Or I didn't grow up with this, so I have to make sure this is tight. And also the stakes, like it was all on me. It got to a point where I had to take out some loans, and then and I was like, okay. But for me, it was like, no, we have to get through this.
Right.
We have to get this piece of paper. And then I had a very sobering moment. I'll never forget. It was my junior year, and this woman had just started working. She was in the cubicle across from me, and she had a bachelor's degree. And I was like, you have a bachelor's degree and you're working here.
Yeah.
And I've been working here for the last 4 years.
Yeah. How's that work?
Like, wait a minute. Is this degree all that is right? And so for me, that was the first time, like, I might need to get another degree. Like that was sort of the first seed for that. And so, and it's very sobering also.
Right.
Because we're sold this dream that there is one way. And so as a college administrator, one of the things that I love is supporting students and letting people know there is no one right way. Everyone's path, everyone's journey, right? I started at 19. I graduated at 24. I did it in 5 years exactly. And I felt no shame about that, right?
Right.
And I try to tell, folks, adult learners, I'm like, and because for me, and this is what you and I have spoken about, I would much rather you have the maturity and know what to do with that investment for your higher education than feel pressured to going into something and wasting money. True. I had a student at the Mount, had a full ride to Mount St. Mary's. And he fumbled it his freshman year because he stayed in his room gaming. And I remember his mom sat in my office and she was like, what?
Gaming? He stayed in there gaming?
He just stayed in just the game. That's it. He stopped going. We sent RAs to check on him, stopped going to class. He wasn't coming to his meetings with me. And his mom was like, what did I do wrong? And I was like, you know your child better than anyone else. You know your student.
Right.
And sometimes people are just not ready. And so when you talk about even your journey of life and that opportunity you had, sometimes you're not ready, right? When Denzel said something, he was like, it's when luck is when opportunity meets the work you put in.
Yeah.
And what you described was an opportunity, but you had not put the work in.
Had not put the work in yet. Yeah.
Right. And so that's what it's about. And I think for me, unlearning the perfectionism, which is why I named, my company, The Grace and Growth, is that life, on my door, I would always have this image, people say success is what that they think it looks like. It's like the straight line. And then what it really looks like is like a line.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then going up, right? And I was like, yeah, we're all in the swirl, because it's especially with the the burst of social media, people have these timelines that we're socialized by. Like I even thinking of the Golden Girls, like the Golden Girls, those women were in their 40s. 40-year-olds do not look the same way now.
Yeah.
We have these archetypes. So when you talk about the ways that we're socialized, life benchmarks that we're supposed to have, right? All of this is like, who made up these rules?
It's these constructs. And I wonder how many constructs, social constructs are there to divide people. And it's just like, how long can we fall for them?
Gender is a social construct. Race is a social construct. Right?
Yeah.
Like they are. It's we put these rules in place. And so, and then our families, our communities perpetuate it. And so to me, a lot of adulting is unlearning, and then you figuring out what success looks and feels like to you. Not just looks, but feels. Because you see the people who got all the money, it looks successful, but they don't feel it.
Yeah, they don't feel anything.
They don't. And that's why we see a lot of people unhappy. We see, higher rates of depression, anxiety, those things. And I wore this. Alex Ellis, this author who I've been following for a while, and this is some of her merch. I have like all of her crew necks, but healing on purpose, right? Doing that work and figuring out, and I'd like to invite in, like you kept saying, triggers. I like to use triggers and hot buttons, because hot buttons are things where you may not know that it's a button for you. And triggers are directly linked to trauma, right? It's anchored in mental health world. It's directly linked to trauma. And so we have all of these hot buttons. There could be, our parents can be our hot buttons, our siblings,
right?
But getting to the core, like you said, and what's happening, and why I appreciate the work that you're doing, is you're connecting our relationships with our bodies to our sense of self, and how we've been learned, how we've been socialized, what we have to unlearn, because it all manifests, right? And addiction counselors will tell you, once you beat one addiction, it transfers somewhere. That's why you see shopping. That's why you see gambling. That's where you see eating. That's where you see sexual, right? You see all of them. So this, to me, this work in life is figuring out what you want, how you want to feel, and cultivating the skills and the way of being in the community that you need, that allows you to walk in your purpose.
I think a hard part with that is you think all or a lot or a majority of your community is going to be your blood, and it's usually not. I mean, for me, that felt hard for me, because there's new people that you meet that are on different levels that you learn from, and they may care for you at a level like, you're one of their children, just because they're at a level where like they can help people. And it doesn't mean like your family's any less than, but I just think that it's tough because the people that you expect to be there usually aren't, if you want to elevate.
But that's the thing where we have expectation. There's this book called The Shack. And when I was in a very heavy place in my life, reading it was very transformational, because there's this it's a fictional book. Essentially, this man has this really horrible tragedy at the shack, and he is called to go back to it. And he meets God. He meets God, Jesus, and Holy Spirit. And there's these revelatory lessons, right? But in it, there's this note about how we have these expectations of each other and how that can be harmful. And it was very transformational for me, because chosen family is, to your point, can be just as powerful and just as transformational.
Chosen
Like everyone's
family.
on their own. Yeah, you have your chosen family. Like you have your family and your family loves you, and you have your chosen family. And there's these expectations we have, even on our parents, right? We have our own archetype that we think our parents should be.
Right.
But when do you start seeing the humanity in your parents, right? That they're not on this pedestal, but you see like, oh, they're not infallible. Like, yeah, they're stumbling, they're struggling.
Right.
They're trying to figure it out the same way we are.
Right.
You know, they're just a little further ahead.
Right. And I think that's important. I think
yes,
when you talk about unlearning, this happens when you're, early 20s, you're finally an adult and you look back on your life thus far. And the unlearning part is tough.
Oh, let me tell you, George, there's so much more
unlearning
that happens.
part is tough.
There's more. So like you have the quarter life crisis. I remember mine vividly.
Right.
Like 25, the quarter life crisis. Because 25 was such a big age, right?
It was big.
And then you get there and you're like, this don't feel the way that I thought, or I thought this. And it's not.
Right.
But when I tell you them 30s, so you're the cognitive leaps that happen from 18 to 21 and then 21 to 25 are serious.
Right.
But then that next leap that happens, that transformation, when you hit that 35, 36 from the 20s, it's 20 is you're pursuing all the success that you thought you wanted. 30 is you're figuring out, oh wait, no, this is not what I wanted at all.
Yeah, this ain't sustainable.
I thought this was this. And no, it's actually not this at all. Y'all lied to me.
It looks different.
Why would you not tell me? Right. It looks different. And in your 40s, you settle into like, this is what I want.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
And you feel more confident in vocalizing it. Because I will tell you, I did not feel like a fully grown adult until 38.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I didn't. At 30, I was like, oh, I'm an adult.
But do you think it's an age thing or a consciousness thing? Because everybody knows
both and.
Yeah.
But I think one of my biggest lessons, I have a sorority sister who I love to, I have so many that I love, but one who was also a higher ed professional. And she has a way of being. She was the dean of students and vice president of student affairs. And she has a way of seeing, like when she speaks to you, she's like peering into your soul. And she has a way, you've met her before. She has a way of being though, that I remember as just a new mid-level manager. Like I was like, I want to be. And I remember by the time I became a director for the second time, so the third role I had when I was a director, that for me, when I was like, there are some things only time will teach you. And so that's why I say both and, because what I learned from her was there was a level of maturity that only time could give me.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right? Time and experience could give you. Like you could see things and think time is going to forge you in the fire a bit.
Right.
To know, right? And so I think we have a society now where people want to jump ahead. And that was also me, right? Like I was like, I don't want to wait till I'm in my 40s to feel this way. But there is some life that has to happen and some things. And when I say life, I don't necessarily mean like valleys, I just experiences. And so when you think about who you want to be, I just share that you're going to pivot and it's going to keep happening. Like I know I probably have two more hard pivots coming easily.
Like in your career, just in life in general, pivot?
In totality, right? Like, cause you're figuring out who you want to be. We're trying things on. How does this feel? Oh, I don't know how I feel about this, or I like this, or I want my life to feel like this. So when you think about either it's the cultivation of things, like we want these status symbols, whether it's a home, a car, a bag, shoes, whatever, whether it's the salary number, all of those things, you have to do the work to figure out, what is this telling me? why am I pursuing those things? And what does that translation look like?
Mm.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, well, I make the salary, but am I still unhappy?
Right.
Well, how do I feel in my life? How do I feel in my body?
Right.
Do I have the time to take care of myself? Literally, right?
I mean, I think it's definitely important. So I didn't mean to cut you off. It's definitely important to talk about the fact that people don't realize and think about how they feel. They think when I get all this stuff, I'm gonna feel this. So how do you feel right now? And like what can you do on a daily basis to make yourself feel like a certain level? It shouldn't be a purse or a car or a house because that's how people get the stuff and they end up empty.
Yes, but sometimes you have to go through those things because again, with however you've grown up, like I think of the opposite. I remember I had a student who grew up probably solidly middle class, upper middle class. Okay, let me change that. Remember the movie ATL?
Yes.
Remember Nunu?
And Nunu was
Nunu was the girl whose dad, I think he was like the senator or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she went over and the skating and all, you know what I'm saying? And
yeah, I remember.
And the guy who came to the country club and he was like, I'm trying to be like, why are you trying to come over here? So to your point of childhood, like no matter how you're raised, it's always going to be, oh, I had too much freedom. I didn't have enough freedom. I was given everything.
Yeah, that
or I'm trying to be down this way, or I'm trying to be down that way. I'm trying to be more upwardly mobile. I want you to think I have these status, right? It's all, and so asking yourself the question, why don't you in this moment feel like you're enough?
Right.
Right. And that's not, I mean, well, I know we're both believers, but say we are fearfully and wonderfully made, right?
Right.
We were cultivated, and yet we struggle, and we all do. And this is not to shame. I think it's just part of life's journey. I think we go through certain things, the procurement of things or statuses, to then realize, oh, what I'm seeking is actually deeper. And sometimes it is being stripped bare.
Stripped bare. That's what happened to me. I don't want. I mean, everybody's path is different, but a lot of things get taken away from people. Like people lose people. People go to prison, people get sick, people get cancer, like people go through stuff. And then the insight after it is usually different because none of the material stuff matters when you're in the hospital. None of it matters when you're in prison. None of it matters when, people that you love aren't okay. The purse doesn't matter at that point. The shoes don't matter at that point.
The car,
all you care about is the people and those relationships. And when people don't realize that until a lot of times it's too late. You care about these people relationships more than anything. If you are alone for a long period of time, you are going to get sad. You're going to get anxiety. You're meant to be around people. Yeah. You're meant to interact and have good relationships. Yeah. And when those relationships get lost, it's disheartening because we need that in humanity. Like if everybody's hearts were a little bit better, we'd be all a little bit better. But with everybody in their own lane in a battle to buy bigger cars and bigger houses and nicer things, everybody gets to a point and they're just empty and their life has no substance. And you can tell it has no substance because all they post is stuff. They don't even have anything to say of value.
Or people around them that they trust, to your point, right? Do you have people around you that you trust that are going to tell you your truths? Your iron sharpens irons, and your community is your mirror. They reflect back to you, And I want to touch on something you said. I was trying to see if I could find it. I think also what's part of that is not having language. And you and I have talked about this, like language matters.
Yes.
And being able to actually articulate how you feel. Like being able to say, I thought this bag would make me feel this.
Right.
And not. And because you let in with the word anger.
Yes.
And I was like, yeah, I feel that, but also I'm trying to find it. There's a feelings wheel. And let me see. There it is. I found it. It's a feelings wheel. And what we see is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's like sadness, surprise, joy, love, fear, anger. But then when I look at anger, there's then rage, exasperated, irritable, envy, disgust, that then gets into revolted, contempt, jealous, resentful, aggravated, annoyed, frustrated, agitated, hostile, hate, right? All those words in anger.
All
So when
those.
you think about that, right, all of that. So when you say I'm angry, do you really mean angry?
Yeah, because it encompasses a lot.
Right. And so that's why I'll send this, I'll text this to you, because
Yeah, send it to me.
having the words to articulate the feelings, even if you do accumulate something. I got this new bag. I feel, or I
Right.
desire to feel this. Or when I say, like, George, when you think of your life, how do you want to feel? What do you want success to feel like? Not look like. What do you want it to feel like? Right? If you say joy, do you mean enthralled, elation, enthusiastic, optimistic, proud, zeal, excited, hopeful, eager, illustrious, right?
Right.
Raptured, enchanted, jubilation, all those words. All those words. So
I
having
think
the
articulation.
vocabulary,
Yeah,
exactly,
it is. It is.
exactly.
The articulation is definitely big. I know for a fact that when I go into certain rooms, if I don't know the lingo, I will get burned. If I don't know the lingo of a business thing or the way a photographer is talking or the way somebody's talking, I will get burned. But also, if you're in a place of pain or distress or despair and you can't articulate, it has to be frustrating and like consuming because you don't know how. So then what do? The emotion is still there, but now
Yeah.
you can't disperse it properly.
Sometimes I say this, I'll say I'm gonna speak in draft. So I'm an
Right,
ENFJ. So I speak to think a lot.
right.
Like, it's helpful for me to talk things out to get to where I'm getting. I process out loud,
Yeah,
right?
I find that. Yeah.
And so figuring out if that's your way. For some people, it's journaling, right? Some people it's reading. It might be working out. You know, it's a myriad of things that can happen. But I also think you're speaking to cultural capital. So cultural capital is the currency that's not financial, but the currency of information that allows you access to things that you may not have had access to. So, for instance, you talk about business, there's cultural capital in business.
Right.
Knowing the difference between an LLC and the other letters, and
They throw all types of at you. ROI.
right. Yep. Tax accountant,
All of
health
it.
insurance, and
Yeah.
like there's all of these. And if you don't have someone that's giving you the cultural capital to navigate it,
It's
you're
like
stumbling,
this.
you're falling. Yeah. You're like,
It's
I
like
don't know what
this.
to do.
Hopefully
Yeah.
the pieces come together.
You just listen, you just like, I think I'm making a pie. I think
Yeah.
it's this, right? And
Looks like it
you
goes
don't have
here. It
the
doesn't
recipe.
quite fit. But it's just someone told me that, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So it doesn't matter when you see it. You have to be ready to see it. Or you
Yes.
won't see it. You gotta be ready to hear things too. I find you have to hear certain things.
Yes.
So I also, in that growth, talking about the transformation, articulation, all that stuff, a big part of that is listening more.
Yeah.
When you listen more, you can actually understand more. So it's easier for you to articulate. See, when you just wait for yourself to give your answer, you don't even know what the other person said. So now you leave the conversation not feeling anything. But when you take a second and you listen to the other person fully,
Yeah.
it makes a difference. And it sounds so simple, but a lot of people don't do it. They just wait to talk. And
Yeah.
it's
Or they just or they're opportunistic, right? It's, I want something from you and I'm not seeing that this is mutually beneficial. And
right.
not knowing how to cultivate relationships in a healthy way to help you reach your goals, right?
Right.
Again, not in an opportunistic way, but in a way where it's like, hey, you have cultural capital, you have knowing, you have something, and I would like to know that, and this is how I can see we could partner, or this is a relationship, or how we can cultivate that.
Right.
There's can be a lot of selfishness, me, I need this, but a lot of times we also just go to people asking for things and we don't even know what we fully want. And so, to your point of like when you're being stripped bare again, it's what we think and what we're socialized to think we want versus knowing that discernment.
Right.
Actually, this is what I want. And this is how I want to feel in my workplace, in my body, right. Because I mean, at the end of the day, what matters is your health and your relationship.
It does. And you don't think that until a lot of times it's so much later in life. And you could have thought this way so much sooner and enjoyed life earlier.
Yeah.
That's why I bring it up. I just want you to enjoy life, people to enjoy life, because it's like your perspective is everything. And when your perspective is just like clouded and tainted, yeah, you can't be just that. Do you feel like, or do you motivate and like push like your friends, like your line sisters and stuff like that? Like if they're reaching for something as their friend for these years, do you say, hey, what's going on with that? We still doing this? Or do you kind of let them glide? Because I just wonder that, because with my friends, I try to push, but sometimes like I might be doing too much. They may not want all that. They may not want to be what I want to be. So I have to think about their perspective. They may want to be where they're at and be comfortable. They may not want to be pushed. But when they tell me something, I think that means you want me to tell you to keep going. So do you run into that?
No, I think it could be easy when you see a path for someone, but people have their own journeys. And so what I've really worked on is, especially if we're talking, it's like, would you like for me to offer you my opinion or advice? Or
of course.
At this moment. No, that's what I say. Yeah, like I will ask, am I listening, or would you like me to contribute?
So that way you're clear. That way you're clear on what they expect.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because if you go in, you can come across a little self-righteous, right? Like you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. When it may just be a lot of times people are, again, speaking in drafts or thinking out loud. They're bouncing ideas off of you. And so wanting to, but when you're on fire about something as you are right now, you're like, yeah, let's go, let's get it, let's do it.
Right.
Like, I'm just thinking out loud right now.
Like, like whoa, I'm just brainstorming.
I'm not sure. So being able to just sort of take that beat, and that's something I definitely learned in my 30s. It was start to ask people, are you asking for? Are we just conversing? Do you want me to be a thought partner with you in this, or are you just sort of speaking in draft right now to see how it feels? You're rolling it around, and being able to ask those sorts of questions.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. That communication is big.
Yes.
So with
we tend to overestimate our communication skills.
I think, bringing back to a point, because I have friends with kids now, I think that the kids' articulation skills are very underestimated. Very underestimated. Like
children are incredibly astute.
What they can like accomplish and learn and comprehend at a young age is more than a lot of people realize, which I think is like, that's like a social thing. Like you're not grown till you're 16 or 18, but there's 12-year-olds building, whole, like whole sciences. Like there's 12-year-olds graduating college. Like it's
I mean, well, and just also understanding
that's an extreme. That's an extreme.
I mean, and it's not that. I mean, I think there are definitely some developmental milestones, and they definitely, I think, children know more than what we think, but they also. I say this all the time, even to my brother. I said they are learning more from watching you than what's coming out of your mouth.
Right.
Like we watch and we observe, and when you are inconsistent and incongruent. Like I grew up with the generation who was do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
And I think what I love about millennials have definitely been like, I'm gonna call you to the carpet. You're saying this, but you do this. So how you hold me accountable for this, right? And I love that for them. And Generation Z, Generation Alpha, like they are on it. But that's the biggest thing. Children, they learn from watching. More than anything, they are clocking what we do. They are. And so those habits that you want, it's because I saw this quote, we're not what we say, or who we are is not what we say, who we are is what we do.
Mm.
And that, I think, is what causes tension in our bodies, is when we know that and we still aren't in alignment.
What do you mean? When you know what?
So when you're saying, I want to do this or I'm this, but you know what you do is not that. So when you are inconsistent.
Yeah.
So for instance, taking it back to the physical, it's like, yes, I am healthy with my body and I'm doing all these things, but you outside, drinking every night or,
Yeah.
On that stuff, whatever that
Right.
stuff may be, right? It's like,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, we see it.
And I'm not talking about, M&Ms occasionally, but I'm talking about like
Yeah.
stuff that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the occasional glass of wine here and there. I'm saying
every weekend, you always, that's all you see.
Sitting down for what? Yes.
Yeah, and you're like, still?
Right. But you're lecturing everybody else on what you need to do on this vegan diet, or
Right.
I understand why you not walking 10,000 steps a day, or you not, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You're not tending to your own mental health and your own mental well-being, right? I think it's when we are inconsistent in ourselves is where the tension happens. And that's where we see those manifestations happen physically also, or we can see those. Again, we are not who we say we are what we repeatedly do. So I think of a person I know who wanted to be a person of their word, but was not. They were like 60-40. You say you want to do this, but your follow through was real inconsistent. And I watched that person spiral, and I was like, that's because who you are is what you do. You're saying this, your acts are this.
Right.
You have not yet resolved that tension.
I think that happens a lot because, especially with social media, there's like this need to have like that highlight reel that's super like staged and superficial. And it's like, it takes energy to pretend. And I don't want to, like, that's my thing. Like, I don't want to use my energy to pretend to look a certain way for strangers online. It's like, that's a lot of energy you can give back to like your spouse or your girlfriend or your kids. Like, you could give that energy back in a way that's going to help. And I think in track.
But George, remember how we're socialized. What are we rewarded for? What are we disciplined for? We're rewarded for the beautiful, color schemed closet and having, the images here. Right. And the amount of people I know who have those beautiful picture perfect couples pictures, but had arguments right before that happened.
Right before. Right? Y'all don't act
right
like
before.
that.
You cussing, calling him everything but a child of God. And then y'all are together.
Exposed.
And so yeah. And so I think that's, again, that getting to the root, into the center of why do we not feel like we're ever enough? And what do we need to do when we choose to heal? Right. And the healing is getting over the fear that I am not going to be accepted in my darkness, in my not so shiny moments. Right. Like, one of my favorite quotes is about the moon, and it's like, you are, I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, why do you love her? Because like the moon, she is beautiful in her full glory, but also in her shadows with her craters and peaks and valleys. And I think that's the personal work. We're socialized 20 some odd years of, if we're not this, we're not lovable, but realizing that even in our darkness, even in our shadows, even in our wretched selves,
right,
we are still loved. We're worthy of love. We deserve love. And we can have it. But we don't believe that. And so what do we do?
Don't believe it. Yeah, we don't believe it, but we also, it's not like, I think, openly shown how to accept love either. I think some people, yeah, how to accept it. Because some people have all the love in the world, but if you can't accept it, you're still gonna feel just as empty or just as anxiety ridden. I mean, wouldn't you? Like if you can't take it in, then
But so the question is, what is the barrier that is preventing you? What is your mind telling you? What is your heart telling you? Do you not feel like you deserve what's being given to you? Do you not feel that is honest? Is it a trust thing? Right. And so what happened in your life that fractured that trust, that
right.
now you're skeptical of the ways in which people are trying to show up and love on you?
Right. And I know for me personally, that's abandonment for
Mm-hmm.
my father leaving. So now it's just like, you get in a relationship and it's just like, I can't have you just up and leave one day.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll be the one to leave first, and I was in that kind of thing for a while. I dealt with that for a while. Like I can't not know and be like taken out of nowhere and you just get up and go as my girlfriend, as my, my person. I would just end it first, sabotage it first. That way I couldn't get hurt. And it was just like I was hurting people that way though.
But you were hurt. You were operating from a place of hurt. So you think
Right.
you're not getting hurt, but you are, because it's
I
a wound.
was. And I was
It's
hurting
a
people.
wound.
It's tough. But I
You're
didn't
operating from a
see it.
wound. Yeah.
Right. So,
That's hard.
it's hard. It's all hard stuff. I think all these topics are hard.
Yeah, but that's the life, right? Like life is, it's the work, it's the
Yeah.
necessary work, it's the figuring out. Just because someone made a decision is not a reflection upon you,
Right.
right? So your father walking out is about him, it's not about you.
Right. And I
And
know the relationship with him and my mother was different before I was there. I'm the youngest. They've known each other for a while. And I have to think about what he was going through at that time, you know, go back to that time. And I'm not upset or angry like at this day where I am now, like I was when I was younger, because I don't expect unrealistic things to change, him to automatically just become a different person and give me all these answers. I don't expect that. But at the end of the day, I want my respect and I want everybody to be taken care of. My mom's okay, this is and that. And that's it. And I think we
yeah,
have that baseline of realistic expectations is much
yes.
better than, just they better say this
Well,
back to me or they better
but I,
answer like this.
but I think we have to, again, get away from the expectations. We have to think about, does the person have the willingness and the capacity? Are they willing and do they have the capacity? Some people are willing and they don't have the capacity.
Which
Some
is
people have the
frustrating.
capacity and they're
Right.
not willing. And so it's, again, getting away from the expectations, but accepting the relationship for just what it is, and knowing that, again, it's not about you or your worthiness.
Right.
It's whatever work he hasn't done or has done to
Right.
do that. And I think, we wonder, like, well, why was I not enough to transform you? Or why wasn't enough for you to want to show up in these ways? And again,
Right.
it's people are all in these, we've been talking about all these layers
All these
of
layers and journeys
that
are
people
all,
got to
yeah.
do, right. And it's not linear. It's right. It's like a cyclone. Like, you're here sometimes, then you're here, then you might be here, then you're back down here, then you're back
Yeah.
up here, then you're back all the way down, right? And so we're all like teasing it out and figuring it out and everything. And it's hard because it's like, well, I want a relationship with you, and you don't have the capacity for that. And
Yeah.
that's not about me. And so I'm going to show up in a way that is authentic to me. And that's all I can do. And that's it. Like, all I can do is be my authentic self and be like, here, hey, dad, how you doing? You good? Okay. And that's it. And not have, and again, it's easier said than done. I mean, I
Easier
have a
said than done,
relationship.
right.
Yeah, I have a relationship with my father.
Right.
I do. He definitely was more of a holiday dad.
Right.
Um, because wasn't in the home, and he's married, right? And again, I just accept for what it is. When I hear from him, yay. and it's what it is. And even at my age, there are times where you hope that it's going to be different, but my dad is consistent. And 40 some odd years of my life, I know what I'm seeing. And so it's like, why keep setting yourself up when this person consistently has shown you who they are? And it's like, yeah, when I have a great conversation with him, love that, we laugh, we have a good time, and that's what it is. And there's no love lost. There's no, it just is what it is. And that's not to say it doesn't hurt from time to time or you're not frustrated. It's just sort of getting back to center, just remembering when the emotions come in, it's like, yeah, it would be nice if it looked different. And this is the relationship that I have. And I'm going to appreciate it for what it is. Again, easier said than done.
Easier said than done, but it does make sense. It definitely
makes sense. And I think that's what we grapple with, right? Like we want something to look some way. So then when you go through things, that is when you see who is in your corner and who shows up. Like I shared with you my recent loss, and he was there. Like my dad was there, and I was moved, and I was happy that he came, to celebrate my mother and everything. And it's when you are going through those things, I just feel like, for me, I just got to a place where I no longer want to focus on relationships that are not reciprocal. Like I'm going to pour into the relationships where it has been mutual.
Right.
I'm not going to stop being me. If you cross my mind, I'm going to reach out to you, but I'm not going to continue to chase and pine after a romantic relationship, a friendship, a family member, right? Like I do not think that is a valuable use of my energy anymore. What I can do is pour into the relationships where we are here, where I know I can follow George and be like, hey, get back into the kettlebell.
Right.
I texted you about the boxing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, George, this is what's going on. And that's where you focus. I think we get out of again, easier said than done, out of the deficit mindset and look at it from an, asset. This is who I have. This is who I can lean on. And I'm grateful for those people.
Right. I think that's important to just know who's around and where you stand. So say it's, because every day is not perfect. Right? So say, it's a day you're not really feeling it, but you have a lot of important things to do. Is there a way that you find kind of resets you or brings you back when you have to, kind of be on your game, but you're not feeling it?
I have to do a brain dump.
Like journal?
That's what's helping. Journal or just jot things down, maybe list it out when it's a bunch of things. I just need to get it all out. Because if I can see it, then it's not clouding everything when I have to sort of move from initiative to initiative. And so I will listen, I will make a checklist and it's not anything, fancy. It's just like, a meeting here, make sure you send this email, make sure you get this report done. You have to meet with this student. Don't forget to email this person here. You just get it. Because once I see it, there's a sense of relief of like, okay,
it's all in your mind.
Right. I haven't forgotten anything. I think the other thing, and I talked to you about the importance of having some sort of grounding routine or something, just something that starts your day. And so for me, it has been like daily meditation, like reading my Bible, a devotion that I do, just having some sort of routine. I've been really focused on hip mobility. So I try to spend an extended period of time, sitting crisscross applesauce just to stretch things out. Those are just things. It's like, no, make sure I'm doing that.
Right.
I think I told you. Huh?
Body awareness is big.
Yes. Just being aware. Yeah. And I think that's the other thing, right? Also, it's just being aware. Like I'll feel when the tension comes. Like I carry a lot of tension, my shoulders and everything. And when I feel it, I'm like, okay, so what do I need to do to take care of myself? Is it in my budget to get a massage, right? If not, can I take a yoga class or, watch YouTube and stretch it out or whatever, right? But just being in tune. And And for me, when I talk about feeling, and this is something that is I've just been working on specifically in the last couple months, is I no longer want to operate in chaos. Like go, 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 go. I know. I desire a life of ease like a retiree. I want to be able to
right.
with my reusable tote bags and go to a farmer's market and have the time in the morning to get up and to stretch.
Right.
Or if I need to sleep in, like being okay with, you know what, like this morning I needed to sleep in. Usually I'm up. The puppy were out like 6:37. It was like 7:30 when we got out this morning because I was mama needed to sleep a little bit more. Like so taking care of my body, because if I'm not good, everything else is gonna fall by the wayside. Whether it's my mental health, whether it's my physical health. So it's the brain dumping and it's that body awareness, definitely.
That's good. So you definitely have you have it down to reset.